Imagine a country that is, just losing huge chunks of its population,
Right.
like aging at a super rapid clip, facing a massive, seemingly insurmountable labor shortage. By every rule of traditional macroeconomic theory, this country should be totally bankrupt.
Oh, absolutely. It should be collapsing under the weight of its own pension obligations.
Exactly. Yet instead of stagnation, its citizens are, they're 3 times wealthier today than they were just a few decades ago.
It's wild.
So today, we're looking at what I think is the ultimate economic paradox. We're unpacking the story of Latvia.
Yeah, it really is a fascinating contradiction to, well, basically everything we're taught in Econ 101.
Right.
Because the traditional formula for a booming economy has always been incredibly simple,
Yeah.
More people equals more growth.
Exactly. You look at the great economic miracles of the 20th century, and they're almost entirely tied to a booming population.
The demographic dividend.
Right. A massive demographic dividend. You have this huge generation of young workers entering the factories. You've got a growing middle class buying, washing machines and cars.
And paying taxes.
Yes. A massive tax base funding the roads and schools. It's a comforting formula because it just makes intuitive sense. You grow by adding more fuel to the fire.
But when you step into the reality of the 21st century, that formula is fundamentally broken.
Completely.
Birth rates are plummeting globally. We're seeing this from Western Europe to East Asia and increasingly in the Americas, too. Populations in developed nations aren't just plateauing, they are aging rapidly and, in a lot of cases, actively shrinking.
Right, which means for the next few decades, the biggest question facing global leaders isn't, how we manage hypergrowth. It's how we manage structural shrinkage without completely destroying our standard of living.
Precisely. And that is exactly why today's deep dive is so critical.
Yeah, so for everyone listening, let me set the scene for the source material we're using today. We are looking at a meticulously researched joint macroeconomic and social development report on Latvia's socioeconomic transition.
And we should mention the presentation itself is fascinating.
Oh my gosh, yes. I have to describe this to you guys. It's not just a stack of papers. It is this gorgeous, minimalist academic slide deck.
It's very intentional design.
So intentional. It's got these pure white backgrounds like
Yeah.
absolute stark hex code FFFFFF white, or sometimes this extremely pale, subtle gray.
No loud colors at all.
None.
Yeah.
They strictly use these elegant, sophisticated Morandi grays, deep navy blues, maybe some calm ochres. And they only use a single contrast color, like a dark red or deep cyan, when they really need to highlight a specific data point.
And I think my favorite part, no 3D charts.
Yes. Absolute zero 3D graphics. Everything is 2D, completely flat. They've stripped away the grid lines, the bulky borders, the unnecessary legends. It's just pure, hard data.
Which perfectly matches the analytical tone of their findings.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack this specific data set, to understand how Latvia serves as the ultimate academic sample of a successful shrinking society.
It's the ultimate case study.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we're going to map out their demographic winter, look at their astonishing economic leap, see how they completely tore down and remodeled their industries, and finally, reveal the secret weapon that made it all possible.
The reason this specific set of data is so crucial is that Latvia proves you do not need endless compound population growth to achieve prosperity.
Right.
You can, in fact, grow wealthier while growing smaller. But to understand how they pulled this off, we have to look closely at the mechanics. How do you actually increase per capita wealth when your workforce is shrinking?
Right, so I want to ask everyone listening right now, whether you're managing a shrinking team at work or dealing with budget cuts, or you're just intensely curious about the future of global demographics, how do you optimize for pure quality when quantity is simply no longer an option?
How do you do more with less?
Exactly. So let's start with the demographics. Because before we get to the miracle, we have to understand the gravity of the crisis. And the baseline reality of Latvia's population curve is, frankly, terrifying from a central planning perspective.
Terrifying is definitely the right word. If you look at slide 3 of this report, the data shows two incredibly stark trend lines moving in opposite directions.
Yeah, it's a very clean 2D dual-axis line chart.
Right. So on the primary axis, you have the total population in a steady, undeniable downward slide. But on the secondary axis, you have the population age 65 and older surging upwards.
And there's this specific marker on the slide I want to point out. They've drawn this stark red minimalist hollow circle around one specific data point.
Ah, yes. the deep aging red line.
Right. It marks the exact moment the 65 and older demographic surpassed 21% of the total population.
Which is a critical threshold.
So, 21%. That means more than 1 in 5 people are of retirement age. The researchers literally label this the crossing into deep aging. But what does deep aging actually mean on the ground? Like, how does that change the daily mechanics of a country?
Well, it means the fundamental architecture of your society has inverted. For most of human history, population charts looked like pyramids, right?
Right, wide at the bottom.
Exactly. You had a massive base of young, working-age people at the bottom, supporting a tiny, narrow peak of elderly people at the top.
Makes sense.
But when you hit that 21% deep aging threshold, that pyramid turns into a pillar. And eventually, it starts to look like an upside-down pyramid. In Latvia, the 65-plus demographic has literally doubled over the past few decades.
Wow. And there's a specific nuance in the data here that we definitely need to highlight. This expanding elderly demographic is heavily skewed female.
Yes, and that comes down to significant differences in life expectancy, which we'll dig into later when we discuss public health.
Right, there are lifestyle factors there.
Exactly. Historically, adult males in this region have faced much higher mortality rates due to a combination of lifestyle factors, specifically alcohol and tobacco consumption, and occupational hazards.
So the older population is mostly women.
Consequently, yes. But regardless of the gender makeup, this demographic shift creates an immense, immediate, and compounding burden on the state.
And the researchers measure this burden on the very next page, slide 4. They use something called the old age dependency ratio. And to you listening, the way they visualize this is brilliant. It's a stacked area chart, and it expands outward in this wide trumpet shape.
That trumpet shape perfectly illustrates the expanding pressure.
Yeah, and they have this dark gray arrow pointing up at the steepest part of the curve. The ratio starts out around 15%, which seems, totally normal. But then it just explodes outward over the years to over 30%.
That expansion represents what economists call demographic debt.
Demographic debt. Okay,
Yeah.
break that down for us.
So, the old age dependency ratio essentially measures how many retirees are depending on a set number of working age people. When the ratio was 15%, it meant that for roughly every 100 working age Latvians, there were 15 retirees.
Which seems highly manageable.
It is. At 15%, the workers pay their income taxes. Those taxes easily fund the public pensions and the healthcare system for the elderly, and there's still plenty of surplus capital left over.
For the government to invest in new infrastructure or education or business growth.
Exactly. The system is flush with cash.
But now that ratio is over 30%.
Right. Now, those same 100 workers have to support more than 30 retirees. And that's just the elderly. When you factor in the youth dependency ratio, meaning the children who also need schools and pediatric care but obviously don't pay taxes, the total age dependency ratio climbs past 50%.
Wait, so for every 2 workers, there's at least 1 dependent entirely reliant on the system.
Correct. And this places an almost unimaginable structural burden on the Social Security system and the tax base.
I mean, how does a country even function like that?
Well, in most historical contexts, when a nation accumulates this much demographic debt, it leads to severe, grinding economic stagnation.
Because the taxes get too high.
Exactly. The state is forced to raise taxes so high just to pay for basic pensions that it completely chokes off private enterprise. Businesses can't afford to hire, workers have no disposable income, and the economy just freezes.
Well, they just print money, right?
Right. Or worse, the government prints money to cover the shortfall, which leads to runaway inflation.
Okay, let me try to put this into a real-world perspective to make sure I'm really grasping the friction here. It's like, imagine you're managing a really successful, bustling restaurant.
Okay, I like this.
You have a kitchen staff of 10 line cooks, and they are putting out hundreds of meals a night. It's a well-oiled machine. But suddenly, over a few years, 3 of your best, most experienced cooks retire.
And you can't replace them.
Right. You can't replace them because there is literally no one applying for the jobs in your town.
Yeah.
But the dining room is still packed.
Mm.
In fact, the customers are demanding more complex, higher-end dishes.
So the demand is actually going up.
Exactly. You have a third less staff, but you're expected to serve the same number of people, if not more, and maintain 5-star quality. If you just yell at the remaining 7 cooks to chop vegetables faster, they're going to burn out, throw down their aprons, and walk out.
Absolutely.
So how does the whole macroeconomic system not just collapse under its own weight?
That is the perfect analogy, because if you maintain the status quo in that kitchen, the system absolutely does collapse.
You just go bankrupt.
The expectation in that scenario is a massive drop in service quality, extreme exhaustion of the remaining staff, and eventual bankruptcy. You cannot solve a structural shortage with brute force. The only way that restaurant survives and thrives is if you completely change how the kitchen operates. You need high-tech convection ovens, automated prep stations, and most importantly, a totally redesigned menu that relies on high-value, high-margin items rather than labor-intensive, low-margin volume.
And that brings us to the core paradox of the Latvian transition. Because Latvia didn't just avoid bankruptcy, they somehow turned that short-staffed kitchen into a Michelin star empire.
They really did.
You would expect this demographic winter, this massive accumulation of demographic jet, to freeze their economy solid. But instead, on slide 5 of the report, we see this astonishing, almost defiant leap in individual wealth.
The wealth generated per person accelerated precisely as the number of people declined. It's a stunning defiance of traditional economic gravity.
Yeah, the data on this slide is wild. It's a very clean bar chart with a moving average trend line. And they've drawn this minimalist dotted circle around the sharp drop of the 2008 global financial crisis.
Which hit them incredibly hard.
Right, but then right after that drop, there's a sharp dark arrow pointing to a massive, aggressive V-shaped recovery. They didn't just bounce back to where they were, they skyrocketed past it.
That V-shaped recovery is the definitive proof of their resilience. It demonstrates that the economic gains they made prior to the crash weren't just a speculative bubble. They had fundamentally upgraded their economic shock absorbers.
So 2008 was like a stress test.
Yes. The 2008 crisis was brutal for Latvia, but it acted as a harsh cleansing mechanism that forced them to accelerate their transition to a more efficient model.
Okay, let's talk about the actual numbers backing up this recovery, because they are staggering.
Yeah.
We're talking about GDP per capita measured in constant 2015 US dollars, leaping from roughly $4,600 to over $15,000.
It's a massive jump.
And if you look at their purchasing power parity, or PPP, the GDP per capita climbs from around $10,000 in the 90s to approaching $40,000.
Which is approaching Western European levels.
Now, I have to stop here and push back for a second, because for anyone listening, whenever I see numbers like this, my immediate thought is, is this real?
Is it just inflation?
Exactly. Is this just inflation doing funny math? Because if a country's population shrinks, technically the per capita math looks better even if the overall economy is totally stagnant. Are we looking at actual tangible wealth here? Or does a loaf of bread in Riga just cost 4 times as much as it used to? Is a Latvian citizen actually 3 to 4 times wealthier?
It is a vital question, and it's the first thing any skeptical economist would ask. But the data provides a definitive answer. This is real, substantive, life-changing wealth growth.
Okay, convince me.
First, let's address the math of a shrinking population. Yes, if the economy stays the exact same size and the population drops, the per capita wealth goes up slightly.
Just simple division.
Right. But Latvia's population didn't drop by 300%. It dropped, but their per capita wealth tripled. The numerator, the actual wealth being generated, grew exponentially faster than the denominator shrank.
Okay, so the pie got much bigger, even as the number of people eating it got smaller. But what about inflation?
That's where those specific metrics come in. When the researchers use constant 2015 US dollars, they are mathematically stripping out the effects of inflation.
Right, they lock the value.
Exactly. They freeze the value of the currency in time so we can see the actual volume of goods and services being produced, completely independent of price fluctuations.
And the purchasing power parity metric.
PPP goes even a step further. It adjusts the macroeconomic data to reflect the actual cost of living on the ground. It answers the fundamental question, how much actual stuff housing, food, transportation technology can a citizen buy with their income in their local economy compared to someone in, say, the United States?
So PPP totally levels the playing field. It takes out the currency exchange rate distortions.
Yes. By showing that PPP GDP per capita went from $10,000 to nearly $40,000, the data confirms that the average Latvian standard of living, their actual material reality, improved exponentially. They didn't just print more money, they created significantly more value per human being.
Okay, so we're back to the restaurant. The fewer cooks are making 4 times as much money. But how? If they aren't just chopping vegetables faster, what exactly are they doing?
They executed a complete shift in their macroeconomic engine. They transitioned away from a demographic dividend and successfully unlocked an efficiency dividend.
Okay, let's break down those two terms because they seem totally central to this whole deep dive.
So a demographic dividend is growth achieved by brute force. You grow the economy simply by throwing more bodies at a problem.
Right, building 5 new factories, hiring 10,000 young people to work the assembly lines.
Mining more raw materials, exactly. It relies entirely on a constantly expanding pool of cheap, available labor. But as we've established, when your population is shrinking and aging, that engine runs completely out of fuel. You literally run out of bodies.
And an efficiency dividend?
An efficiency dividend, on the other hand, is about working exponentially smarter. It means taking that single remaining worker and giving them the education, the technology, the software, and the institutional support to produce 10 times the value they used to.
So you aren't adding more cogs to the machine. You're fundamentally upgrading the machine itself.
Economists call this capital deepening equipping labor with more capital and better technology.
But wait, you can't achieve that kind of massive efficiency by just tinkering around the edges? I mean, you can't just take a 50-year-old traditional farmer, hand him an iPad, and suddenly expect he's 10 times more productive.
No, you definitely cannot.
To make a smaller workforce that much more productive, you have to completely tear down and rebuild the fundamental structure of the economy, right? You have to change what it is people actually do when they wake up and go to work in the morning.
Precisely. And that requires immense societal friction and adaptation. You have to aggressively abandon low-yield, labor-intensive sectors and migrate your workforce into high-yield, knowledge-intensive sectors.
And the researchers document this structural remodeling beautifully on slide 6. This is a 100% stacked bar chart laid out horizontally.
Showing the evolution of employment.
Right. And you see the agriculture segment just shrinking away over time. A few decades ago, agricultural employment sat at around 20% of the entire workforce. 1 in 5 people were working in farming or related agricultural fields.
Which is very high for a modern European nation.
Yeah, but over the course of this transition, that number plummets down to roughly 6%.
That is a massive generational reallocation of human capital.
Meanwhile, the industrial block manufacturing construction stays relatively stable, hovering around 23%. But the service sector, the dark gray block on the chart, it explodes. It completely takes over. They have this little pull-out box highlighting that the service sector has expanded to take absolute dominance, nearing 68% of total employment in the country.
It marks a true post-industrial leap.
So let's look at the mechanics of this. What does it actually mean for a country to move from 20% agriculture to nearly 70% services? Because I think when a lot of people listening hear service sector, they often think of retail workers or baristas, which, doesn't sound like a recipe for tripling your GDP.
No, it doesn't, and that's a very common misconception. When economists talk about the service sector dominating a post-industrial economy, they are not primarily talking about local, low-wage retail.
Right.
They are talking about advanced, high-value services. Finance, insurance, consulting, logistics, software development, engineering, and digital design.
The knowledge economy.
Exactly. When 20% of your people are working in agriculture, a huge portion of your society's daily physical and mental energy is going toward producing low-margin raw commodities. You are highly vulnerable to weather, to global commodity price swings, and the work is intensely physical.
And hard to scale without more land and more people.
Precisely. When you drop that to 6%, it doesn't mean you stop farming or stop eating. It means you have modernized, mechanized, and consolidated your farming so effectively that you freed up 14% of your entire adult population to go do something exponentially more lucrative.
It's like a rural blue-collar farming town that over the course of a single generation entirely transforms into a boutique consultancy and advanced tech hub.
That's a great way to picture it.
They still have some highly efficient GPS-guided automated farms on the outskirts and maybe a couple of modern robotic factories. But the heart of the town is now filled with software developers, financial analysts, and system architects.
And the export data on the next slide proves this transition perfectly.
Yes, slide 7. This one is a super minimalist area chart filled with this very calm light gray. And it has these stark black solid dots marking massive milestones in export dollars.
Tracking high-tech exports.
Right. The research shows that high technology exports grew exponentially from around $350 million to over $2 billion.
That geometric growth in high-tech exports is the key to everything. If we connect this to the bigger picture of global value chains, this is exactly how Latvia completely insulated itself from its demographic crisis.
By selling tech.
Yes, they shifted their labor out of low-yield agriculture and heavily into information and communication technology, ICT goods and services.
So walk me through the mechanics of why ICT is so resistant to population decline. Like, why does selling software protect you from a shrinking workforce?
Because software, digital services, and advanced manufacturing do not require massive armies of manual laborers. Think about the economic concept of marginal cost. If you are a traditional manufacturing economy and you want to sell 1 million more cars, you have to buy 1 million times more steel, build massive new factories, and hire tens of thousands of new line workers. Your costs scale linearly with your output.
Right, every new car costs a lot of money to make.
But if you are a software developer in Riga and you develop a brilliant piece of enterprise management software or a cutting-edge cybersecurity protocol, you can sell that digital product to 1,000 companies or 1 million companies globally. What is the cost of producing that 1 millionth copy of the software?
It's basically zero. I mean, it's just server space.
Exactly. The marginal cost of replicating a digital product or a high-level consulting framework is practically zero. They moved into industries that scale through intellectual property rather than physical labor.
That's so smart.
They started selling ideas, optimization, and code. And ideas don't require a booming population of laborers. They just require brilliant, highly trained minds.
Okay, but this raises a massive glaring question. A high-tech, ICT-driven service economy requires highly educated brains.
Yes, it does.
You need coders, you need systems engineers, you need bilingual project managers who can negotiate with German and Scandinavian firms. Where on earth did Latvia find this elite, highly trained workforce amidst a shrinking population?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question.
Right, because if your total population is bleeding out, the pool of available talent is, by mathematical definition, getting smaller every single year. You can't just wish an army of software engineers into existence.
You are absolutely right. And this is where most countries facing demographic decline fail. They try to transition to a knowledge economy, but they don't have the human capital to actually pull it off.
So how did Latvia do it?
You find that workforce by ensuring you leave absolutely zero potential talent on the table. You look at historically marginalized or underutilized segments of your population, and you invest in them and integrate them with extreme prejudice.
And this brings us to what I honestly think is the most mind-blowing, genuinely surprising part of this entire deep dive. The secret weapon.
The human element.
Yes. Because the technology didn't build itself. The algorithms didn't write themselves. The real hero of the Latvian economic miracle is revealed when you look closely at the demographic breakdown of its newly minted elite workforce.
The data here is a statistical revelation. It completely upends traditional labor models.
So for you listening, let's look at slide 8. The researchers use this gorgeous butterfly chart. Some people call it a dumbbell chart.
Which is perfect for comparing two distinct groups.
Exactly. And it showcases this massive gap between men and women. So let's start with the baseline of education. Youth literacy in Latvia is astonishingly high, consistently sitting over 99.7%.
So basically universal literacy.
Right. Basically, every single young person can read, write, and participate in a modern society perfectly. But when you move up the educational ladder, when you look at who's actually acquiring the advanced skills needed for this new economy, this massive gap opens up.
The female human capital premium.
Yeah, they have this thin, elegant arrow pointing to the difference. Female attainment of bachelor's degrees and above sits at around 32.8%. Males sit at just 21.6%.
That is an enormous gap.
It's huge. Women are absolutely dominating higher education in Latvia.
Economists refer to this as the gender dividend. While the total population was shrinking, the concentration of highly educated women was surging. And importantly, this wasn't just a matter of getting degrees and then exiting the workforce to raise families.
Right, because the employment data on slide 9 proves they put those degrees to work. And I love the graphic they use for this. It's a waffle chart.
The 10 by 10 matrix.
Yeah, 10 by 10 grid of squares. And almost the entire grid is highlighted in this deep, dark color, which represents formal, wage-earning employment among women.
This is a critical distinction that we really need to define for the listeners. In many developing or transitioning economies, you might see high rates of female labor force participation.
Which sounds good on paper.
Right, it sounds good. But a huge percentage of that is what the International Labor Organization calls vulnerable employment.
Like what?
That means unpaid family work on farms, informal street vending, Gig work with no contracts, no health benefits, and zero job security. It's labor, but it's not economically empowering or highly productive labor.
But the waffle chart shows that vulnerable employment for women in Latvia is practically non-existent.
Exactly. They are deeply embedded in the formal sector. They are signing corporate contracts, earning regular high-value salaries, paying income taxes, and participating fully in the modern regulated economy.
So if I'm connecting the dots here,
Mhm.
when the agricultural sector shrank and the factories needed fewer people, but the tech firms and the global export businesses suddenly needed thousands of brilliant minds, the Latvian women were the ones holding the advanced degrees.
They were the ones ready.
They were the ones ready to write the code, manage the international logistics, and run the export firms. Women literally anchored the knowledge economy.
It is impossible to overstate how crucial this mechanism was to their survival. The highly educated female workforce effectively neutralized the labor shortage caused by the overall population decline.
Wow.
Think back to your restaurant analogy. It's as if you lost those 3-line cooks and things looked dire. But the waitresses, who had quietly been going to advanced culinary and business management school at night, stepped into the kitchen, completely redesigned the menu, optimized the supply chain, and earned the restaurant its Michelin star.
That is exactly it. They didn't just fill the gap, they elevated the entire operation.
This highlights a profound, unignorable lesson for any organization or nation facing contraction. In a shrinking society, maximizing the potential of historically underutilized demographics is not just a polite social justice initiative.
It's survival.
Exactly. It is the ultimate hard-nosed economic survival strategy. If Latvia had maintained a traditional patriarchal culture that discouraged women from pursuing STEM degrees or kept them out of formal corporate leadership roles, their economic V-shaped recovery would have been a flat line.
They would have just collapsed.
They simply did not have the sheer numbers of men to pull off a transition to a high-tech service economy alone.
It really forces you to look at your own environment. For everyone listening, think about your own industry, your own corporate board, your own local government. How much raw talent, how much GDP is just left sitting on the table when gender parity in education and formal high-level employment isn't aggressively prioritized?
Latvia didn't have the luxury of wasting half their brainpower.
No, necessity forced extreme optimization. But okay, we have to look one layer deeper here. Because a brilliant workforce, no matter how highly educated, can only operate effectively if the country's underlying operating system is stable.
That's a great way to frame it.
Right, because you can have the best female coders and engineers in the world, but if the physical infrastructure fails, or if the workforce is constantly sick, or if corrupt officials demand bribes just to open a tech startup, the wealth generation stops immediately.
Yep.
Which brings us perfectly to the next phase of our deep dive. Upgrading the operating system. We are talking about public health, institutional governance, and the digital ecosystem. For the knowledge economy we just described to actually thrive, the physical, institutional, and digital environments must be relentlessly optimized.
Let's start with the physical operating system, the health of the citizens. Because a shrinking workforce needs to be a remarkably healthy workforce.
Exactly. When every single worker is responsible for generating 3 times as much economic value to support the aging population, you cannot afford for them to be out sick or dying prematurely.
The health data on slide 10 is fascinating in this regard.
Yeah, they use this incredibly smooth, deep blue line chart. And they have these vertical dashed lines showing a specific time period, and right in the middle, this massive downward pointing arrow.
Indicating a cliff-like drop in mortality rates.
Right, under 5 mortality and maternal mortality over the last 2 decades.
Yeah.
The sheer percentage drop is a massive public health victory. But there's another statistic here that really caught my eye, and I want you to explain it because it seems totally counterintuitive.
Okay, let's hear.
The number of hospital beds per 1,000 people dropped from around 14 down to roughly 5.5.
Yes.
At first glance, cutting the number of hospital beds by more than half sounds like a terrible idea, especially for an aging population. Doesn't that mean the healthcare system is collapsing?
It's deeply counterintuitive, I agree. But in the context of advanced public health, it actually represents a massive leap in systemic efficiency.
Okay, how?
An overabundance of hospital beds often indicates a healthcare system that is failing at the primary care level. It means the system is warehousing the sick treating chronic, late-stage illnesses with long, expensive, highly invasive hospital stays because they didn't catch the disease early.
Oh, I see.
So dropping to 5.5 beds per 1,000 people, while simultaneously seeing overall mortality rates plummet and life expectancy rise, means the Latvian healthcare system underwent a structural shift. They moved from reactive warehousing to proactive, outpatient, and preventative care.
So they're catching things earlier.
Exactly. They are investing in better diagnostic clinics, better primary care physicians, and better public health campaigns. They are keeping people out of the hospital in the first place.
That makes total sense. A hospital bed is the most expensive place for a citizen to be. You want fewer people in beds because you want them healthy at home and contributing to the economy.
Precisely. Though the researchers did include one cautionary note regarding public health, going back to what we discussed earlier about the elderly population being mostly female.
Right, the adult males.
Yes, the data indicates that adult males in Latvia still face elevated chronic disease risks and premature mortality, largely tied to behavioral and lifestyle factors.
Like smoking and alcohol.
Specifically, high rates of smoking and alcohol consumption, leading to cardiovascular disease. It is a lingering public health challenge that artificially depresses male life expectancy. But broadly speaking, the systemic public health upgrade, the shift to preventative care, was profound and necessary for their economic leap.
Okay, so the physical bodies of the workforce are healthier and more efficient. Now let's look at the institutional health of the country. On slide 11, the researchers measure governance, and the key metric here is something called the Control of Corruption Index.
This is arguably the most important data point in the entire report regarding their transition.
So the visual for this is a radar chart, or like a spiderweb chart, and they have this dark, semi-transparent polygon that expands dramatically outward to show the newest data.
Showing a massive improvement.
Right. It shows Latvia's corruption index climbing from negative territory, meaning highly corrupt in the late 90s, up to a highly respectable positive 0.69 today. Concurrently, their metrics for the rule of law and overall regulatory quality expanded synchronously.
It's a total institutional overhaul.
Now, I want to play devil's advocate here for a second. We all agree corruption is bad morally, obviously. But strictly economically speaking, how do abstract concepts like rule of law and corruption indexes actually drive tangible wealth? Why does an anti-corruption score matter to a tech startup's bottom line?
It matters because corruption is the ultimate tax on efficiency. To understand this, we have to look at the concept of transaction costs in low-trust versus high-trust environments.
Okay, transaction costs.
In a low-trust, corrupt environment, starting and running a business is a nightmare of hidden costs. You want to open a logistics firm. You have to pay a bribe to the local licensing clerk to get your permits. You want to ship goods. You have to pay off the customs inspector.
So you're just bleeding cash everywhere.
Exactly. And if a vendor steals from you, you can't trust the local courts to enforce your contract because the judge might be bought. All of this friction makes business incredibly expensive and highly risky.
And I imagine foreign investors wouldn't want anything to do with that.
Foreign investors won't touch you with a 10-foot pole. And crucially, your best, brightest, most highly educated young people, those brilliant women with advanced degrees we just talked about, they will emigrate.
Brain drain.
Yes. They will take their talents to London, Berlin, or New York because they refuse to play in a rigged system.
But when you clean it up
and establish a high-trust environment, contracts actually mean something. The rules are clear, transparent, and equally enforced. This dramatically lowers the cost of doing business. It makes entrepreneurship viable for normal citizens, not just the politically connected oligarchs.
it levels the playing field.
It attracts foreign capital,
Yeah.
and most importantly, it convinces your domestic talent to stay and build their futures at home because the system is finally fair.
It's exactly like cleaning the malware off a sluggish computer. When an operating system is full of viruses, which is corruption, every process takes forever. The computer crashes constantly, your data is stolen, and you absolutely cannot run any heavy, complex programs.
That's a brilliant way to visualize it.
But once you run a deep antivirus sweep, format the hard drive, and install a rigid firewall, which is the rule of law, suddenly the whole operating system runs lightning fast. It can finally handle complex, heavy tasks like building a multi-billion-dollar tech sector.
And once the computer is clean and running fast, what's the next step? You need to connect it to the network.
Boom. Digital infrastructure. Slide 12. This is an S-curve area chart tracking Latvia's internet adoption. And they've drawn this dashed box around the steepest part of the curve, labeling it the digital dividend explosion.
Because it really was an explosion.
Internet adoption skyrockets from 0 to over 90% for both men and women across the country. And they didn't just get people online to check email, they built a comprehensive digital state.
They digitized public services, banking, corporate registries. This massive investment in digital infrastructure further lowered transaction costs and eliminated bureaucratic bottlenecks. It was the physical manifestation of their new high-efficiency operating system.
And what's truly remarkable is that they did it without destroying their physical environment.
Which is incredibly rare.
Right. Often when we see a country triple its GDP, it comes at a horrific ecological cost. Massive deforestation, smog-choked cities, polluted rivers. But slide 13 proves otherwise. It's this beautiful donut progress chart, and right in the middle, in huge font, it says greater than 54% forest coverage.
Despite becoming a wealthy tech hub, their landmass remained largely wild.
Furthermore, they show their electricity sector dropping its carbon emissions. They prove that massive V-shaped economic growth can actually be decoupled from heavy carbon-intensive environmental destruction.
Because they skipped the heavy industrial phase and went straight to the knowledge economy, a software company running on a digitized grid doesn't need to clear-cut a forest.
So if we review this massive societal OS upgrade, the citizens are healthier, relying on preventative care instead of hospital beds.
Right.
The government is clean, transparent, and enforces contracts. The internet is ubiquitous, fast, and secure, and the natural environment is protected. This creates the perfect, highly fertile ground for the final piece of the macroeconomic puzzle.
Which brings us to our final section, the open economy. Because no matter how healthy, how highly educated, or how perfectly digitized your citizens are, a small, shrinking nation of fewer than 2 million people simply cannot generate enough domestic consumption to drive a tripling of GDP.
You can't get rich just selling coffee and software to each other.
Precisely. You need outside money. A small nation must leverage the wealth of the outside world. They had to become an indispensable node in a much larger network.
And the research visualizes this global integration on slide 14. It's a minimalist bar chart tracking foreign direct investment, or FDI, net inflows. And they've placed these elegant little wireframe circles highlighting massive spikes in foreign capital flowing into the country.
Foreign direct investment is a critical indicator of global trust. It isn't just foreign speculators buying stocks on an exchange, it's when foreign corporations commit physical, long-term capital.
Like building physical infrastructure.
Exactly. It's a German automaker building a parts facility. It's a Scandinavian tech firm opening a massive regional engineering office. It's global logistics companies building physical hubs in your country.
And those spikes in the FDI data, the ones circled on the chart, they aren't random. They resonate perfectly in time with the major policy shifts and institutional upgrades we just discussed.
It's pure cause and effect. Capital is inherently cowardly. It goes only where it feels safe and where it is treated well.
So true.
When Latvia formally joined the European Union, proving they had aligned their regulations with Western standards, when they proved they had actually cleaned up corruption and established the rule of law, when their digital infrastructure came online and their highly educated female workforce was ready to be deployed, the foreign capital just flooded in.
Because global corporations looked at Latvia and didn't see a shrinking, dying country. They saw a highly secure, incredibly smart, deeply reliable partner, fully integrated into EU supply chains.
And for a small country, especially in that part of the world, being deeply interconnected economically is also a massive form of geopolitical security.
Wait, expand on that. How is FDI security?
When your economy is deeply intertwined with the rest of Europe, your stability becomes Europe's stability. Your borders effectively become the economic borders for massive global firms. That foreign direct investment isn't just cash, it's a protective shield.
It creates an incredibly strong, invisible moat. They traded the vulnerability of isolation for the strength of integration. By becoming essential to the global value chain, they guarantee their own survival.
Exactly.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground here today, going from demographic collapse to a high-tech, high-trust economic miracle. Let's pull it all together. The final slide of this deck, slide 15, is just brilliant.
The summary slide.
Yeah, there are no complex data charts here. It's just 3 columns of text, separated by these heavy, dark gray dividers, with the core takeaways totally bolded. It reads like the ultimate playbook for a shrinking society.
And it is a playbook that almost every developed nation is going to need to read very, very soon.
So, takeaway everyone from the report. You cannot easily reverse a shrinking population. The demographics are what they are, and birth rates are incredibly stubborn. But you can increase individual productivity by going absolutely all in on education.
Especially female education.
Right, specifically by recognizing and leveraging the female human capital premium. If you are losing quantity, you must maximize the quality of every single mind in your society, regardless of gender. Leaving any talent on the table is economic suicide.
Takeaway number 2, institutional hygiene is not optional. It is the absolute prerequisite for wealth. Anti-corruption measures and the firm establishment of the rule of law are the only ways a developing or transitioning economy can cross over the middle income trap.
Without high trust, you cannot build high value.
Exactly. You cannot attract the foreign capital you need to fund your efficiency dividend if your system is corrupt.
And takeaway number 3, digital infrastructure and high-tech exports are the protective moats for a small nation. You have to decouple your growth from manual labor, brute force demographics, and carbon-heavy industry. You have to plug yourself deeply into the global matrix of ideas, digital services, and advanced, frictionless trade.
It is a profound, highly actionable blueprint.
It really is. So, to you, the listener, I ask again, look closely at your own organizations, your own communities, or even your own industry. Are you still operating on the outdated assumption that you need endless, massive expansion just to survive?
Are you waiting for a demographic miracle that isn't coming?
Right. Are you just waiting for more bodies to solve your problems? Or are you looking at the reality of the data, reading the room, and learning how to optimize, how to elevate your human capital, and how to thrive within limits?
It requires a complete paradigm shift. For the last century, global economics has been utterly addicted to the idea that a growing population is the only way to grow an economy. It was the iron law of the 20th century.
The math has changed.
It has. Today, as global birth rates plummet worldwide, from Western Europe to East Asia, from the Americas to parts of the developing world, we are all eventually going to face the demographic winter.
We're all going to have to run that restaurant with fewer cooks.
Exactly. And in that context, perhaps Latvia isn't an anomaly. Perhaps Latvia is a time machine. It is showing us that a smaller, smarter, highly equitable, and digitally integrated society isn't a crisis waiting to happen. It might actually be the exact blueprint for the future of human prosperity.
A time machine showing us how to do more with less. Think about that the next time you look at a shrinking chart and assume the worst.